Welcome, everyone. Today, we're unpacking a truly fascinating story that actually hides a fantastic lesson right inside a magical premise. The title of today's explainer is Who Did Patrick's Homework? And honestly, I am absolutely thrilled to guide you through this one step by step. We're going to break down the narrative, look at the characters, and uncover the real secret at the heart of this classic tale. Let's get right into it.
Okay, let's dive into this. Be honest for a second. Have you ever wished someone else could just magically do your homework for you? It's kind of that universal student experience, right? I mean, we've all had those days when an assignment just feels way too boring or maybe too difficult, and you'd literally rather be doing absolutely anything else. Well, that exact feeling is the perfect starting point for our story today.
And that brings us to our main character. Meet Patrick. Now, Patrick was a kid who firmly believed that homework was, well, just completely boring. So instead of opening his books, he spent his time playing hockey, shooting hoops on the basketball court, and playing Nintendo. His teachers were constantly warning him. They'd say, "Patrick, do your homework, or you won't learn a single thing." And actually, they had a pretty good point. If you constantly ignore your work, it eventually catches up with you.
And because he wasn't doing his work, there were definitely times when Patrick felt like an ignoramus. Now, an ignoramus is basically an ignorant or stupid person, someone who just lacks knowledge. And deep down, Patrick knew he didn't know much. He felt that lack of knowledge heavily. He sometimes felt like a complete ignoramus around his friends, but he just hated homework so much he felt totally stuck. He really didn't know what to do about it.
But then, everything changes. The inciting incident of our story happens on a seemingly normal day. Patrick notices his pet cat playing with what looks like a little doll. Thinking he's just rescuing a toy, Patrick grabs it right away from the cat. But to his absolute shock, he discovers it isn't a doll at all. He had just rescued something entirely different, something straight out of a fairy tale. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the description of what he actually found. It was a man of the absolute tiniest size, an elf, and he had this really peculiar, old-fashioned look about him. He was wearing this little wool shirt, old-fashioned breeches, which, are those trousers that stop just below the knee, and a high, tall hat that looked very much like something a witch would wear. I mean, just a completely bizarre and mysterious sight.
And this tiny man was absolutely terrified of the cat. He yelled out, and just picture this tiny, squeaky, totally panicked voice, "Save me! Don't give me back to that cat! I'll grant you a wish, I promise you that!" Just imagine the desperation there. The elf is backed into a corner, offering a magical, once-in-a-lifetime deal in exchange for his safety. And Patrick, he couldn't believe his luck. Here was the answer to literally all of his problems standing right there in the palm of his hand.
So, Patrick agrees to save the elf, but with one major condition. He tells the little man to do all of his homework until the end of the semester. And exactly how many days was that? 35. That's the ticking clock of our story right there. Patrick tells the elf that if he does a good enough job over these next 35 days, Patrick might even score straight A's. Now, the elf was not happy about this. He literally kicked his legs and scowled, but a promise is a promise, and he agreed to do the work.
So the elf starts doing the homework. But there was one major glitch in Patrick's seemingly perfect plan. A glitch, of course, being a sudden malfunction or problem. And the problem here was huge. The elf had absolutely no idea how to do human schoolwork. He was an elf after all. He was constantly running into roadblocks and needing help, shouting, help me," at Patrick all the time. When it came to English, the poor elf was completely lost. He'd squeak in his tiny voice, "I don't know this word! Get me a dictionary!" But then he'd backtrack and demand, "No, actually, what's even better? Look up the word and sound it out for me, letter by letter." So instead of kicking back and relaxing while the elf worked, Patrick had to sit right there, flipping through the dictionary, finding the meanings, and reading every single syllable out loud to this complaining elf.
And if you thought English was bad, math was a total disaster. Patrick was completely out of luck. The elf shrieked, "What are times tables? We elves never need that." He was totally baffled by human mathematics. Addition, subtraction, division, fractions, it was all completely foreign to him. He was so frustrated that he demanded Patrick sit right beside him and guide him through every single math problem.
And this brilliantly illustrates just how demanding this arrangement actually became for Patrick. I mean, his workload was immense. For English, Patrick is looking up meanings. For math, he's teaching addition and fractions. And for human history, well, elves know nothing of human history. To them, it's a total mystery. So the elf would yell at Patrick to go to the library, fetch piles of books, and read them to him. Patrick literally had to manually guide this tiny creature step by step through every single subject. And because the elf needed so much help,
every single day, in every single way. That little man was a nag. Now, a nag is someone who constantly complains or demands things, and that was the elf to a T. Always complaining, always needing more books, always needing things explained. It was driving Patrick absolutely crazy. He couldn't just leave the elf alone. He had to be actively engaged in this whole homework process constantly.
The irony here is just fantastic, isn't it? The boy who hated homework more than anything was now working harder than he ever had in his entire life. He was staying up super late into the night reading and explaining things to the elf. He was experiencing extreme weariness. He'd literally drag himself to school the next day with puffy eyes and bleary vision. It was a massive drag, but he just kept pushing through to make sure the elf finished the assignments.
Let's move to and see how this builds into the grand finale. Because finally, the climax of our story arrives. It's day 35, the last day of the semester. Because all the homework was completely finished, the elf's contract was officially up. With no more work to do, the little elf quietly and slyly slipped right out the back door, completely free. And the result? Patrick actually got his A's.
The transformation was just unbelievable. I mean, the old Patrick hated homework, was rude, and totally ignored his chores. But the new Patrick? His classmates were absolutely amazed, and his teachers were full of praise. Even his parents wondered what on earth had happened to him. He was now a model kid. He cleaned his room, did his chores, was cheerful, and was never rude. It was like he had developed a completely new attitude towards life.
But how did this really happen? The elf was gone, Patrick had his A's, and everyone was amazed. But let's look a little closer here. Can you guess the real truth behind Patrick's sudden, miraculous success? There is a hidden layer to this story that makes it truly brilliant. Let's uncover the real mystery here.
Just between you and me, I'm going to share a little secret with you. So, the crucial point is this. Remember how the elf was constantly yelling for help? Remember how he knew absolutely nothing about human history, math, or English? He didn't know the definitions, he didn't know the times tables, and he couldn't read the history books by himself.
That's right. Patrick had done it all himself. By constantly guiding the elf, looking up the words, reading the books, and solving the math problems to show the elf what to do, Patrick was unknowingly doing his own homework the entire time. He worked harder than he ever had, thinking he was just helping the elf. But in reality, he was the one learning, studying, and earning those straight A's.
It's such a brilliant twist, right? And it leaves us with an incredibly powerful thought. What magic can your own hard work unlock? Patrick thought he needed a magical elf to succeed, but the real magic was simply his own effort disguised as a favor. There is no shortcut to success, but when you put in the hard work, the results can be truly magical. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer today. Keep learning, keep working hard, and I'll see you next time.